Hey guys, welcome back. I have a video here from dear old Britain. I believe it was them. We had watched a video about the foods from yesteryear that you guys would eat for bonfire night that like Nan used to make, I think is what kind of what was in the title. This one is it's called 25 Lost British Appetizers You'll Never Taste Again. So I thought this one could be interesting. It's a little longer, just over 22 minutes. But I've got time if you do. So I will link this video in the description. The last video we watched of theirs, I thought was really good. You guys seemed to like it as well and thought that it was pretty accurate. So it could very well be somewhat AI, but I think for the most part it was pretty good. So let me know. I'm sure you guys will of any like inconsistencies or anything like that. But like I said, yeah, I'll link this video in the description along with a link to Patreon and a link of how you can support the channel here on YouTube. If you can do it, it would help me out a lot and I would really appreciate it. But otherwise, I'm happy to just have you here watching. So let's go ahead and get this going.
Today we're going to chat about 25 British appetizers from the 1960s and 70s that I challenge you to find being served on a menu today. These were once the height of sophistication, balancing convenience with a touch of flair. They turned up in hotel dining rooms, working men's clubs, and at countless suburban dinner parties, leaving memories as vivid as the prawn cocktail glasses they so often arrived in. Each dish tells the story of Britain's changing tastes when tradition met convenience, and a little hint of the exotic began creeping onto tables that had once known only meat and two vegetables. No appetizer defined the era more than the prawn cocktail. Served in a tall glass, layered with limp lettuce, tiny cold water prawns, and a generous spoon of Marie Rose sauce, it became shorthand for something special. Imports trebled between the mid-60s and mid-70s, with more than 25,000 tons of prawns entering Britain annually. Restaurants could charge 3 or 4 shillings for what cost pennies to assemble at home with a tin of prawns in brine and a squirt of ketchup stirred into mayonnaise. The visual mattered as much as the flavour. That glass arriving at your table carried a promise. You weren't having an ordinary supper. Even in working-class households, when a prawn cocktail was set down in front of you, it felt like an occasion. Many still recall the cloying sweetness of the sauce or the crunch of lettuce leaves that had wilted hours earlier, but at the time it looked modern and glamorous. Before prawns became the marker of sophistication, it was the humble half-grapefruit, cut neatly in two and
I don't think I've ever had prawn. I did try Ural's Bert's prawn cocktail chips. They absolutely tasted like the mayonnaise. Um, yeah, they tasted like mayonnaise. Um, we do like well, not we generally do, although I do like shrimp. We'll do the kind of the similar thing with like a glass or cocktail glass, and it'll have like the shrimp around it, and then we have our own like cocktail sauce. There's like it's a red sauce, but it's kind of horseradishy. Um, my family always did it as like a poor man's, and usually at Thanksgiving, you would find on the table you would have cauliflower and the cocktail sauce that we would eat.
served either plain, dusted with brown sugar, or grilled until caramelized. It offered a sharp, palate-cleansing start. Hotel menus of the 50s and 60s listed grapefruit cocktail alongside soups, often priced at sixpence, and the dish was pushed as healthy and refreshing. Imports of grapefruit peaked in the late 60s at nearly 50,000 tons a year, making it affordable for the average family. School canteens even tried to introduce grapefruit halves to children, though most remember the sour faces that followed. It was a dish that split opinion, loved by those who enjoyed the tang, loathed by anyone who thought fruit had no place at the beginning of a meal. Another fruit-based appetizer soon became the picture of dinner party style, the melon boat.
I remember having grapefruit, like a half a grapefruit in the morning before school when I was a kid, and I liked like grapefruit juices and stuff like that. I liked that sour taste that it would give. But I also remember loading it up with sugar, so I think that helped.
A wedge of cantaloupe balanced on a plate, often finished with a glacé cherry or a curl of ham, became a staple in middle-class homes eager to impress. For many, this was their first taste of melon, brought in from Spain or Italy by the lorry load. Air freight made it possible, and imports trebled between 1960 and 1970. At 1 shilling and fourpence per pound, melon was an affordable luxury, exotic enough to feel modern but cheap enough for a hostess to offer without guilt. Guests were expected to marvel at its colour and sweetness, even if by the time it reached the table it was watery or bland. The presentation carried more weight than the taste. Eggs, by contrast, were all about familiarity. Deviled eggs became the staple of every buffet table, their bright yellow centres dusted with paprika, promising flavour even if they didn't always deliver. Hard-boiled, halved and filled with yolk whipped up with mustard or anchovy paste, they were cheap crowd pleasers. Eggs averaged just 3p each through the 60s, which meant a dozen could feed a roomful of guests. National
Love deviled eggs. I make them every year. Sometimes twice. Sometimes I make them at Thanksgiving and Christmas. Uh, I have my mama's recipe. She made delicious, delicious deviled eggs. Me and my dad would down them. Remember, my dad would take a spoon and just like get all of the yellow, the out of it, and eat that, and then eat the white. I like all of it. But yeah, I love some deviled eggs. I think a lot of Americans really enjoy deviled eggs because when I make these, especially like if we're having a family function, they are gone.
Food Survey data shows egg consumption per household peaking at nearly 300 annually by 1973, and deviled eggs helped keep that number high. Women's magazines printed endless variations, from curried yolks to breadcrumb bulked versions. Hosts loved them because they could be made ahead, arranged on floral china, and presented with little effort. Children often raided the trays before the party began, leaving guilty gaps in the perfect circles. If deviled eggs felt cheerful, vol au vents were ambitious. These puff pastry cases, baked until golden and filled with creamed chicken, mushrooms, or even curried prawns, became shorthand for 70s dining. Just roll pastry, launched in the mid-50s, allowed even nervous cooks to bake them in minutes, and by the early 70s, sales topped 12 million packs a year. At just under 20p per packet, pastry cases offered both value and style. They graced hotel banquets by the hundred and suburban buffets by the dozen. Nobody pretended they were authentically French, but in Britain they stood as proof you were modern and capable. The smell of butter and cream filled kitchens, even if the fillings turned soggy before the night was out. For a homelier touch, stuffed tomatoes held their place. Hollowed out and filled with rice, tuna, or egg mayonnaise, they offered colour against a sea of beige pies and pastries. Once considered a luxury, tomatoes had become commonplace thanks to heated greenhouses in Kent and imports from Spain. By the late 60s, they sold at around 1 shilling per pound, encouraging cooks to experiment. Hot versions baked with cheese gave off a savoury aroma, while cold ones stretched meagre protein further. They embodied the frugal creativity of the time. One tomato served as both container and course. Celery boats brought crunch.
My mom used to make the stuffed tomatoes when I was a kid. She hasn't done it, I don't think, since I was a kid. Um, but my entire family on both sides love some tomatoes. I remember My grandfather would get himself a tomato and eat it. Just salt and pepper right at the sink, just as it was. My dad's mom used to do the same thing. So even with my son when he was little, he that was one of the things that he liked, his tomatoes. I could always just like cut up a tomato real quick and just put some salt and pepper on it, and that was one of the things that he would eat up. Now he's a little more picky, but I can always get him to eat like a caprese salad with the tomatoes and all that. That's at least I know always going to be a win.
A stick of celery filled with cream cheese or pâté might not have thrilled children, but it looked smart on a cocktail platter. Celery imports peaked at over 25,000 tons annually in the 60s, with supermarkets promoting it as modern and healthful. At sixpence a bunch, it padded out party trays cheaply. Hosts loved them because they filled space and looked neat, even if most guests nibbled politely before reaching for something tastier. Recipes in Good Housekeeping suggested filling them with blue cheese, smoked salmon paste, or even Marmite, but few children were persuaded to try. Perhaps the simplest of all was egg mayonnaise. Chopped egg bound with mayonnaise and spooned onto lettuce leaves or spread between two slices of bread, it appeared in pubs, cafes and office canteens across the country. By the early 70s, mayonnaise sales had risen fivefold thanks to Heinz and Hellmann's marketing it as modern and versatile. At 2 pence an ounce, it was a cheap way to make eggs feel more like a meal. Cafes.
Did you only put mayonnaise in with it? We have like it's just we call it egg salad, but it's like boiled eggs cut up like this, and you do put mayonnaise in it, but you also add yellow mustard, and it gives it a little tang, salt, pepper, and it's delicious. I make it probably once or twice a month.
Served it with a limp slice of cucumber, pubs offered it as a starter on its own, and families used it to bulk out sandwiches. For many it was reliable, filling and plain. By the late 70s, though, diners had grown tired of its blandness, and it slipped quietly off menus along with much of Britain's appetizer past.
See, that's you can go to, especially in the South here, but you can go in anywhere and get you an egg salad sandwich just about. And I know it's super big in like is it Japan? I've heard they have like even it from like a gas station like a 7-Eleven. That's one thing when I go over there, amongst other things, obviously, but that's one thing I absolutely want to try from there. It always looks so good and fluffy.
If egg mayonnaise was the most ordinary appetizer, sardines on toast offered something both cheap and divisive. These oily little fish, tinned in either tomato sauce or brine, became a staple in pubs and cafes through the 50s and 60s. A single tin cost less than a shilling, while fresh fish at the market often sold at triple the price. National Food Survey figures show over 30,000 tons of sardines arriving annually during the decade, mostly from Portugal and France. They were spread across toast triangles, dusted with pepper and passed off as a proper starter. For many, though, the smell lingered longer than the taste. Families were split. Fathers liked the richness, mothers tolerated it, children turned up their noses. Still, sardines on toast endured. It was cheap, filling, and reliable. Many remember their first pint in a smoky pub, ordered with nothing more than a sardine sandwich, the sort of food that vanished once menus started promising continental flair. Coronation chicken salad cups reflected a different Britain altogether. First created in 1953 for Queen Elizabeth II's coronation banquet, the curried chicken dish was still going strong 2 decades later. Cold cubes of chicken bound with mayonnaise, curry powder and sultanas were spooned into lettuce leaves or ramekins, turning leftovers into something exotic. At 2 shillings a pound for chicken breast, it wasn't the cheapest, but the spice made a little stretch a long way. By the 70s, curry powder sales had doubled, not from authentic Indian dishes, but from this sweet yellow salad that seemed daring but safe. No buffet spread felt complete without a few lettuce cups filled with coronation chicken. Many remember the look, bright, sunny yellow against pale iceberg leaves, even if the taste was more mayonnaise than curry. At the sweeter end came the fruit cocktail in syrup. Tinned fruit had once been a wartime treat, but by the 60s it was routine shopping. Imports from South Africa and California arrived in their millions. Served in a glass coupe with syrup intact, it passed as a fancy opener in hotels and clubs. For sixpence a tin, you could serve a family of 4, a colourful start, even if the pears were mushy and the cherries unnaturally bright. Children loved it, adults humoured it, and hostesses loved how little effort it required. In truth, it was pudding in disguise, but in homes where glamour mattered more than authenticity, tinned fruit cocktail did its job. Guests were expected to nod politely, not question why their appetizer was swimming in syrup. More ambitious.
My grandmother, my mom's mom, used to always, when we would, so we were a huge family, and my mom's parents divorced when my mom was young. So as a kid, and my parents were divorced. So as a kid, I would end up, on the holidays, in the morning, we would go to my mama's or my nana's house, and she would always have like biscuits, ham, and she would have a fruit cocktail, and she would kind of doctor it up with some orange juice and cut some fresh fruit and put that in there. But that always reminds me of her. But after that, then I would end up going to my dad's mother's house, have a big dinner lunch there, and then go from there and go to my mom's dad's parents' house, my great grandparents, and we would finish out the evening there with another big dinner. And this was, we had such a big family that like we would have those big long fold out tables. We would have them going from the dining room all through the living room. There would probably be at least 5 of those tables packed full of people.
Ambitious were asparagus spears with hollandaise. For many Britons, their first taste of asparagus came not from the field, but from a tin. Thin spears stacked neatly in brine jars became the height of elegance, often dressed with a pale sauce. Imports from Spain and Italy peaked in the late 60s, though most of it travelled poorly, leaving limp stalks with little flavour. At around 2 shillings per tin, it was a splurge reserved for guests. The sight of asparagus carefully arranged on a plate convinced diners they were experiencing something continental, even if the taste was watery. Housewives wrote proudly in diaries about serving asparagus with sauce, while their husbands quietly wished for something more filling. It was the kind of dish remembered less for flavour than for the performance of serving it. Smoked mackerel pâté brought stronger flavour and stronger memories. Mackerel was abundant off British coasts, cheap at just over 1 shilling per pound and perfect for smoking. Its oily richness, tamed with cream cheese or butter, turned into a spread that filled toast triangles at countless dinner parties. By 1970, mackerel sales had doubled as smoked varieties became fashionable. The smell gave away its presence long before the tray was brought in, rich, bold, unmistakable. For some, it was the first sign of a more adventurous Briton, tasting beyond beef and lamb. For others, it was too strong, too fishy, too much. Either way, guests remembered it, and that's why it became a staple of the decade. Ham mousse promised sophistication at a bargain. Smooth, pale pink, whipped into airy lightness, it looked delicate in little ramekins with toast fingers on the side. With blenders appearing in more kitchens during the 60s, home cooks could experiment with mousses that once belonged to hotel chefs. Ham offcuts cost 1 shilling and 6pence per pound, and blended with cream and gelatin, stretched into enough servings for a party. The result was light, cold, and vaguely savory, not quite satisfying but impressive to set on the table. Its pastel shade photographed well for magazines, but the taste often reminded people of school dinners or potted meat. Guests ate it politely, few asked for seconds, but hosts kept making it because it looked the part. By the early 70s, avocado had made its entrance. Marketed as the avocado pear, imported mostly from Israel, it was considered exotic. Avocado Ritz became the fashionable way to serve it, halved, stone removed and filled with prawns bound in pink dressing. At 15 pence each it was expensive, but the fruit's novelty made it irresistible for dinner parties. Guests marvelled at the creamy green flesh, even if some weren't sure whether to eat it with a spoon or a knife. Cookbooks promised it was the fruit of the future, though the average Briton thought it bland unless disguised with prawns and sauce. Still, its presence on the table proved you were keeping up with the times. Today, many recall their first taste of avocado with a mix of curiosity and disappointment, a symbol of Britain's cautious step into global food culture. Stuffed mushrooms
Hey, avocados made a comeback. Now they have that like avocado toast. I'm guessing you guys do that there. I'm sure it's kind of everywhere now. I know it was a big like California West Coast thing, and then it's kind of made its way over here. I'm not huge on it, but I do love some avocados. Um, we eat it a lot in like our Mexican food, and like I made some wraps yesterday that were like chicken and a lot of veggies and stuff like that, and I got avocados for those. But I can eat avocado by itself. I like it. And it is super good for you, that good fat.
closed out the course with something both simple and satisfying. Large caps filled with breadcrumbs, garlic and butter were baked until golden, filling kitchens with savoury aromas. Mushrooms, once seasonal, were being mass-grown in Lincolnshire and Yorkshire, selling at around 1 shilling per pound. That made them affordable enough to feed guests without strain. The smell of garlic, still unusual in British homes then, made the dish feel continental, even daring. Cookbooks offered endless variations, from cheese-stuffed to bacon-topped, giving hosts plenty of room to experiment. They were versatile, cheap and practical, disappearing from plates almost as quickly as they came out of the oven. For many, the memory isn't of the mushrooms themselves, but of the way their scent clung to curtains and clothes long after the party ended. If stuffed mushrooms brought warmth from the oven, pineapple and cheese sticks brought pure spectacle. Cocktail sticks skewering cubes of cheddar and chunks of tinned pineapple appeared at every party buffet, often pushed into half a grapefruit to create the famous hedgehog. It looked cheerful on the sideboard, even if half the sticks ended up untouched. Cheese had only come off ration in 1954, and by the 60s, production had soared to nearly 300,000 tons annually, with cheddar selling for around a shilling a pound. Tinned pineapple imported from Hawaii and later Kenya cost only a few pence per slice. The sharp cheddar against the syrupy fruit divided opinion, but it gave hosts the splash of colour they craved. For many, that pineapple and cheese hedgehog remains one of the most enduring and most laughed at symbols of 70s entertaining.
Why? Why not just like you'd still do the toothpicks, but just put them on a plate. Why do you need that? That's funny.
Anchovy eggs kept the spotlight on eggs, though in a saltier guise. Hard-boiled, halved and topped with anchovy fillets, they were regulars on hotel and club menus. Anchovies, mostly imported from Spain, cost 3 shillings a pound, making them more of a treat than a staple. The strong, briny hit pleased some and horrified others. The National Food Survey of 1964 recorded anchovy consumption at less than an ounce per person each year, yet they still appeared on menus for the impression of being continental. Many diners remember pushing the fish aside and eating the egg plain. They weren't popular, but they looked stylish, and sometimes looking stylish mattered more than the taste. Scotch woodcock lingered on a little longer. Despite its hearty name, it was nothing more than scrambled eggs on toast spread with anchovy paste, a dish borrowed from the gentlemen's clubs of Victorian London. By the 60s, it had survived mainly on hotel menus and in the kitchens of those who clung to older traditions. It was cheap to make, eggs at 3p each, anchovy paste in every grocer's jar, and filling enough to pass as a first course, for most families, though it felt fussy and out of step with the times. Guests often expected something richer and got eggs on toast instead. By the late 70s, Scotch woodcock had nearly disappeared, remembered more for its curious name than for its taste. Smoked salmon rolls brought the glamour back, thin slices of salmon curled into roses and served with lemon wedges became the hallmark of weddings, banquets, and hotel dining rooms. Scottish salmon production stood at over 20,000 tonnes annually in the 60s, but smoked cuts remained expensive at nearly 10 shillings a pound. That exclusivity gave them power. To serve smoked salmon was to show success. Guests remember the silky texture, the light saltiness, and the ritual of buttered brown bread on the side. For many, it was their first taste of luxury. Smoked salmon didn't just feed you, it signaled you had arrived. For households that wanted the appearance of sophistication without the cost, chicken liver pâté provided the answer. Livers were cheap at just over a shilling a pound and could be transformed with butter, onion and brandy into a smooth spread. By the 70s, nearly every cookery book featured a recipe for pâté, and dinner party hosts swore by it as an economical showpiece. Spread onto toast fingers, it looked and tasted continental. Not everyone liked the earthy flavour, and the smell while cooking could fill a whole house, but it stayed popular for years. Many recall their first taste of pâté as the moment they felt they were eating something truly sophisticated, even if it came from the cheapest cut of meat. Soup starter cup.
My mom tried to do like pâtés when I was a kid, and to me, what it always like looked like and tasted like and often smelled like was cat food. I could never get into it really.
Were another relic of an older dining style. Small porcelain cups of consommé or tomato soup, served at 6p each in hotels and clubs, provided a pause while the main meal was prepared. The National Food Survey recorded packet soup sales doubling through the 60s, with Bachelors and Knorr selling millions annually. At home, mothers poured boiling water over powdered mix and called it a first course. Diners rarely remembered the flavour, but they remembered the formality, the steam rising from tiny cups, the gentle clink of spoons, and the sense that a proper meal had a beginning, middle, and end. By the 80s, that ritual felt fussy, and the soup starter vanished from everyday menus. Crab cocktail offered a seaside twist on the famous prawn version. Along the south coast, where crab landed daily, hotels layered crab meat with lettuce and pink Marie Rose sauce as their signature starter. At 3 shillings a pound, fresh crab cost more than tinned prawns, but offered richer flavour. Holidaymakers recall the salty tang of crab against the sweetness of the sauce, eaten while looking out at the sea.
That looks like ceviche. Um, I love crab. I love it. I love it. I'll take crab over lobster any day. Some crab legs, and when you're at the beach, I don't know that there's anything better than that.
Inland, the dish never quite caught on. Tinned crab lacked flavour, and inland households stuck to prawns. Still, for those who grew up by the coast, crab cocktail remains tied to memories of seaside hotels, sunburnt shoulders, and family holidays. Stuffed avocado halves carried the promise of modernity. Marketed as avocado pears, imported mostly from Israel, they were filled with prawns, crab, or egg mayonnaise. At 15p each, they were hardly cheap, but their novelty gave them status. Guests were dazzled by the unusual green flesh, even if many weren't sure what to make of the bland taste. Magazines described them as nature's salad bowls, encouraging hostesses to present them proudly. In truth, they were little more than containers for familiar fillings. Still, to put avocado on your table in the 70s was to prove you were keeping up. Today, many remember their first avocado as an anti-climax. Not bad, not good, just odd. Finally, duck à l'orange starter portions brought the 70s obsession with French cuisine to the appetizer course. Roast duck breast, sliced thin and served with a tangy orange sauce, appeared in fashionable restaurants and aspirational cookbooks. At 10 shillings a pound for duck, it was a luxury, but it symbolized the new glamour of dining out. Birdseye began selling frozen duck portions in 1972, allowing housewives to attempt it at home, though with mixed results. The citrus tang felt daring, the meat rich, but many husbands quietly preferred plain roast beef. Still, for a while, duck à l'orange stood as the ultimate statement, proof that Britain was looking outward, even if the average household only tried it once.
That was it. As you guys could see, 29. Um, yeah, most of these things were things, I mean, at least I would say over half of them are things that I've tried that are fairly common here, or versions of it, um, or at least were at one time. I don't see anything wrong with a lot of that. I mean, the presentation on some of them was a little silly, but you're gonna have that in the 70s, and 60s, 50s. They did a lot more like hosting parties and stuff like that than I think most people do now. I think, especially since COVID and all that, I think probably even before that, people kind of stick to themselves. I don't think there's as many people hosting cocktail parties and stuff like that, or anywhere close to probably a tenth of what it was back then. That you would need these dishes that just look good, maybe not taste so good, but I don't see an issue with any of these. But let me know if if you guys still see them around, if you still make them, if you remember them, what your favorite was. Um, yeah, I enjoyed that. Hopefully you guys did as well. Hit the like button, hit subscribe, hit the bell if you guys want to get notifications of when a video posts. And have an awesome, awesome day.